Sometimes my brain feels too crowded, like a beach on a hot summer day. Too many fingers and toes fiddling and flipping. Too much grainy sand grinding and itching. I shake my head, but it doesn't help much. Too heavy. Too much stuff inside, pushing on my brain so that I can't think. I went to the store to get something to eat. Something for me and something for Mandy. I know that when I go to the store, I should walk in quickly and only put what me and Mandy really need into the basket. Sometimes I forget the basket and I carry the stuff in my hands. That's okay, because then I only buy what I can carry and it's quicker that way. But today, I had a basket. I was walking by the fruits and vegetables, staring at the deep, pretty colors. The apples were red, the store lights reflecting in their waxy skin. The bananas were yellow and green and brown. Then I saw it was going to be my lucky day. A huge batch of grapes had arrived. Red ones, green ones, black ones. The grapes are my favorite, and Mandy likes them too. All those little ovals stuck onto the branches, like people crowding around an ambulance. Faces blank and waiting. I was waiting too, watching the grapes, waiting to see if one would roll off, and then maybe I could taste it to see if they were sweet or sour this week. The store man gets mad if he sees you tasting, so I wait for one to fall on the floor. Then I say it's garbage and was going to get thrown away. I waited and waited, but nothing was happening. I had to keep telling my hand to be patient. That soon, one grape would fall off the branch and fall to the floor and I could taste it. I don't like buying grapes unless I can taste them. They are too sour. Me and Mandy don't like them. And then they sit in the fridge and get soft and mushy. And then they start to stink. So I like to wait and taste them. None of the grapes were moving. So I stepped a little closer to them. Their smooth, bald faces stared back at me. I saw a couple were cracked, as if they had too much stuff inside of them and had split open. "Come on, guys," I whispered to them. "Why don't you make a break for it?" I leaned over further, watching them taunting me. Their silence, their refusal to move was getting on my nerves. I wanted to squash all of their tiny little bald heads. And suddenly I felt a strong hand on my arm. "Outside," the man said to me, pulled me along, and I tried to follow, but my feet wanted to stay with the grapes. "Move, feet," I told them, but they weren't listening. One was whispering to the other about a grape on the floor. In fact, it had been there all along and thought it was a big joke that I'd been waiting and waiting for a grape to taste, and they'd been hiding one right over there. "Goddamn feet," I yelled and tried to kick one against the other. They laughed at me again. The man pulled me out of the door of the store. My feet were laughing so loud I couldn't hear what he said. He looked kind of funny with his face all red and his black hair hanging and all stringy in his face, like shoelaces. It escaped from other people's shoes in the store. He opened my hand, and I heard a new burst of laughter. My hand had been hiding a grape from me too. The grape had burst, and its red pulpy juice stained my skin. I wiped the grape guts against my leg. The man left. I don't know what he said. The din of my feet and hand laughing at their oh so funny jokes was too loud to hear. "Take me home then," I told them. They stopped laughing and set to work, making their way along the sidewalk. My apartment's really close to Bloor Street. And that's good, because that means I don't have to go too far to take the subway anywhere. Sometimes the subway's in a bad mood, so I don't go down there. I can tell by the way the ground is shaking when he's having a bad day. Today I didn't have to take the subway because I didn't have to go very far. My building is only 4 blocks from the store. There's some nice trees and hedges along the way. I like the way the leaves whisper their secrets in the summertime. Today they weren't telling me much I didn't know already, so I was glad to get to my building. Walked up the stairs, 37 of them. I count them every day just to make sure no one steals any. When you live in a big city like Toronto, you can't be too careful who's going to take something when you go out. Nobody else seems to bother to count them, so it's up to me. I sometimes call myself Stair Keeper. The key leaps into my hand, which makes my mouth smile, because sometimes the key likes to play hide and seek. Usually that happens when I have lots of bags, or if I have to pee real bad. That key is a tricky one. You really gotta watch him. Even though I put chains on him, he still manages to wriggle into the weirdest places. There's been a party at my house again. All the party guests fly out when I come in. Their buzzing and fuzzing of wings as they leave hurts my ears. Bye, flies. Hope you had a good time, I call after them. They don't even say thank you. Isn't that how they always are? Eat and run. I wander through the house and see that Mandy's taking a nap. She slept through the party. Maybe she just drank too much beer and fell asleep. I look at all the dirty dishes and see some more flies are hanging around waiting for the leftovers. Party's over, I yell at them, waving a big spoon. Go home! They ignore me like they do every day. Sometimes it seems like no one does what I say. I walk through the apartment, checking to make sure no one has played my tapes or read any of my books. I count the soap balls in the bathroom. They're round and smooth like the grapes, only all sorts of pretty pale covers like mauve and pink and yellow. There are still 63 in the jar, and I put it back on the shelf. My nose starts to complain that there's a bad smell in the apartment, but I don't listen to him. He's always smelling something, and usually it's bad. There's nothing I can do about it anyway. I go into my bedroom and sit on my bed. The book is still there on my pillow. I got the book from the library a while ago because it had some interesting things in it. It was an old book because the pictures were black and white. And the people in the photographs wore funny stiff hairdos and really ugly clothes. The words keep falling off the pages, but the pictures hold still quite well. There are old-fashioned drawings of people screaming with devils dancing around their heads, while other people hold them down. There are scary pictures of people in cages or in chains, of people covered with long, slimy bugs. The pictures that I keep looking at are where the guy has a hammer and a huge big nail and is pounding it into another guy's forehead. The guy getting the hole in his head seems happy, and there are drawings of all the nasty little demons that had been living in his head, running away like cockroaches from the light. I look at that picture a lot. I like the smile on the guy's face in the picture, when he has the hole and all the devils have run away. I touch his smile and try to make my lips do the same. I fall asleep hugging the book. There's a banging on the door. I don't want to answer it, but my feet and hands are already there, finding out who it is. Of course, it's nosy Mrs. Clark, my social worker. The flies have been partying again, and they all run away as Mrs. Clark invites herself in. My God, Kathy, what's that horrible smell? She asks as she comes into the apartment. I don't smell anything, I lie. Look at this place. It's a disaster, she cries as she waves her hands around. She goes into the kitchen, then looks at all the dirty dishes. Jesus, no wonder. Don't you ever clean up? She starts to scrape the food into a garbage can. My mouth starts to snicker and my hands try to stop it quiet. I can feel my blood bubbling, pulsing against my veins, trying to burst through my skin. Kathy, why are you hitting yourself? Mrs. Clark asks me as she takes my hand into hers. Mrs. Clark is actually quite pretty, although she's nosy. Her nose is so huge you can barely see her eyes. And her skin is the color of coffee with cream in it, only shinier, like a penny. Today she is glowing and sweaty, shiny like a big new sweaty penny. Her hands are petting my hands. I can hear them giggling like children, like Mandy used to. Have you been taking your medicine? Mrs. Clark asks me. No. My hands hid it from my eyes, and then, it's okay, we'll find it. She stands up and goes to the kitchen cupboard. She opens it, and wouldn't you know, there are those tricky pills. She opens the jar, and I can hear their tiny bodies rattling against each other inside. I was right where we're supposed to be, Kathy. Try not to forget where you keep it. You have to try to live on your own. The doctor said you were ready. Besides, there's no money for you to stay in the hospital. I remember the hospital a little bit. Shiny white place that stank. Not like my apartment does. A different medicine-y kind of smell. Boy, people were really bossy there too. Mrs. Clark hands me some pills and a glass of water. As I take them, I can feel her beady eyes leering at me, searching for clues. I know what she's looking for, but I've tricked her. Oh yes, I'm smarter now. Not like when I had to go into the hospital. You have to be so careful and so smart. Mrs. Clark takes my hand and pushes up the sleeve of my shirt. The faded white snakes dance, intertwining with the pink ones along my flesh. Mrs. Clark smiles as she inspects my other arm. I'm glad to see you're not cutting yourself anymore. That's a very big improvement. Now let me help you clean up this kitchen, and I'll be off. Seemed like forever before Mrs. Clark leaves. But finally the kitchen's up to her sky-high standards, and she's gone. I lock the door behind her and look in on Mandy. She's so sweet when she's asleep. She may have been up while I was napping. She doesn't like Mrs. Clark, so she probably hid in the closet or under the bed until she was gone. Now she's curled up in her tiny bed, like a little fairy princess or something. I kiss her cheek and go into my own room. I look out the windows at the street below. The sky is dark with night time. How quickly my day has gone again. I watch the yellow eyes of the cars race up and down the streets for a while, and listen to the voices of the people walking by. The noise is starting to build up, and it's pumping through me. Soon my feet are arguing with my legs, and my arms are bitching about my hands, and my blood is boiling with angry revelations of its own. Let us out! It's too crowded in here! The blood screams from behind the fleshy wall. It pushes against me. I can see its anger as my arms and legs swell like an ocean. There is no choice but to have a bit of release, like a pressure cooker or one of those air hose things on those trucks. I look in the mirror and see all my clothes are gone. My hands must have torn them off while they were fighting, and now my feet are kicking them across the room. Stop it, I say to them. They do. I look at myself in the mirror again. staring at the maze of scar tissue that adorns my body. Lines of release weave their way from my face to my feet in a tapestry of red and white. I trace my fingers along the lines, remembering the pain and the pleasure that came from the burn of the razor blade. My fingers already hold the delicious, shining flash of steel. I kiss the blade, feeling the cool nick of its teeth on my lips. I sigh, a delicious shiver rippling up my spine as the blade finds its mark on my hip. So little unmarked flesh. The blade hungrily bites into the weave of pale and vibrant marks, adding its own comments to the rack of pain. Blood drips down, bright shining garnets, laughing as they escape to the floor. I watch the beads spread themselves into each other, building strength in numbers. I feel better, and listen to the blood drops argue with each other on their way to their next home. The release never lasts long. Again, my brain is too crowded. Too many voices talking at once, telling me what to do, where to go. My head aches with the noise. And I lie down on the bed. I feel better. I look at the picture in the book. I remember Mandy telling me about the guys with the holes in their heads. She called it tree panning or something. I knew about some of the other things they could do to you at the hospital, about the electroshock. And I even met a really weird man who said they had cut his brain in half when he was young. Electroshock wouldn't work to relieve the pressure of all the voices and the beings living inside. It would just jiggle them around. Like when you stick something into an electric socket that you're not supposed to. And cutting your brain in half is no good, because everyone is still inside. But having a hole so that everyone can come and go, that would be great. Like a doorway to a house. I wonder if there really are little devils like the ones in the book living inside of my head. It would explain a few things, wouldn't it? I remember Mandy wishing she had a hole in her head. The voices were getting on her nerves. It's enough to drive you crazy. Everyone's shouting and complaining all the time. I go into her room and poke around in her drawers. She sleeps so soundly you could set off a keg of dynamite and she wouldn't budge. At last I find what I'm looking for. Right in front of me, on the floor. I pick up the hammer and the heavy iron nail thing, the chisel. Hey Mandy, I shake her. Did it really work for you? I ask her. She lays dreaming dreams of peace, her hair spread across the pillow. She isn't going to answer me. I go into the bathroom and stare at my face. Large brown eyes stare back. You would think there's so much chaos behind this face. I lean closer, wondering why I hear snickering and giggling. Yet I can't see anything. Yep, an escape hatch is definitely what is needed here. I go into my bedroom to get the book. I come back to the mirror, holding up the picture to compare it to my head. I touch the spot on my forehead that looks the same as the picture. A doorway. That's all I need. A little bit of pressure release. I feel like a balloon that's stretched to the point of breaking. I place the chisel against my forehead so that the cold pointy part is pressed in. I raise the hammer and hit it. The chisel slips down, ripping a line from my forehead down my nose. I watch as the blood runs to the surface, giggling at being released. I sigh. It's going to be hard to get momentum with the hammer. I wonder if I laid down, if it'd be easier. But then I think about that hammer smashing down on me, maybe popping one of my eyes like a grape. Wouldn't want that to happen. So I look at the hammer and chisel and try to think. I look back at the book. The picture's one man is doing it to another. Guess I should have asked Mandy to help. I'm afraid she'll screw it up. I remember doing it to her. How carefully I had placed the chisel while she had her nightmares. How I had tapped the hammer 9 or 10 times. I really had to press hard to get enough weight. But at last the chisel burst through her bones. I remember her screams of joy as she realized she was being released from the bad little devils that had lived in there. I know she has been grateful to me ever since. But I don't need her to do it for me. I can do it for myself. The doctor and Mrs. Clark were counting on me to be independent, and that's exactly what I plan to do. I stare at the scrape on my head, watching the blood oozing from the parting flesh like raspberry jam. Then I knew what to do. I wash my face, dabbing at it with a towel. I get most of the blood off. I pull a few strands of my long brown hair over my eyes just in case. Then I go down to the landlord's place and knock on the door. I'm smart. I have a clever plan. The landlord is huge and pale and white, like one of those big walrus things that begin with an M. Never looks at my face. He just gives me what I want and slams the door. The drill is really heavy in my hand. I just have to plug it in. I practice on the wall a few times to get the hang of it. I like the whirring, buzzing noise, the way the machine vibrates when I squeeze on the trigger. Finally, I'm ready. I hold the drill point against my forehead, staring in the mirror. Could it be much harder than the wall? I press the trigger, and my whole head starts to vibrate as I hear the drill singing against my bone. I stare in the mirror, concentrating as best as I can while blood splatters the reflection and drips down my fingers. It's slippery, hard work, but at last I can feel the bone give and the drill push through to my brain. It burns for a few seconds as the bit is stuck. I take my fingers off the trigger and tug the drill bit back out. I take a deep breath as I lean into the mirror to examine my work. I wait for the people to come marching out, or for the little devils to fly away. But no one comes. I poke at the hole, trying to see inside. I decide the hole's not big enough. I put the drill back to my forehead and start to make another hole. I hear knocking at the door. I ignore it and continue to drill. The blood is splattering the mirror, laughing as it's flung free from my body. Over the laughter in the drill, I hear other voices, outside voices. After I gave her the drill, I started wondering what a crazy person would do with one. And the drilling noises I heard, well, I just thought I'd better call you. I'm glad you did. Better to be safe then. Her words roll into a scream as I catch a glimpse of Mrs. Clark in the cluttered mirror. Kathy, what are you doing? She grabs my hands, trying to pull the drill away. But the second hole isn't done yet. I try to hang on, but she's very strong, and my fingers are rebelling again. The drill slips to the floor, tearing a long slash in Mrs. Clark's leg on the way down. The people! I have to let the people out. I point to the book and the walrus grabs my hands. Mrs. Clark stares with eyes way bigger than her nose at the book. You thought if you drilled holes in your head, the voices would run away? She asks, splashing her face with cold water. Worked for Mandy. She hasn't had any problems at all since she did it. Mandy? Who's Mandy? Mrs. Clark asks. Her roommate, just as fruity as she is, Walrus says. I was never told she had a roommate, Mrs. Clark says. Jesus Christ, where is she? Sleeping, I say. Didn't want to bother her. Walrus hangs on to me with his wobbly flippers while Mrs. Clark runs into Mandy's bedroom. She starts screaming again. Sound really rattles through my head, like wind whistling through the holes, making my teeth sing. Oh my God, Kathy, what did you do to her? After that, things are pretty much a blur. They tie up my hands and lead me into one of those fast white cars that screech really loud. Ambulance. Yeah, an ambulance. A crowd has gathered, their faces blank and staring, their mouths gaping open and shut like fish out of water as they watch me go by. Mandy gets to ride in the bed on wheels, all covered up from the prying eyes with a big white sheet. I try to talk to her, but she's not listening. So it's back to the hospital for us, I'd say to her. At least, maybe the voices will finally stop. But they don't. As a matter of fact, I think even more creatures have crawled in there. The arguing is almost constant. I can hardly wait till I get out of here and finish the second hole. But in the meantime, I must be smart and clever. And I have to pretend that I'm sorry that I put the holes in so that I can get out sooner. At night I touch the holes, pushing my fingers in, stroking the soft wet moistness inside. It's soothing. And sometimes the voices stop, then I can get a good night's sleep. During the day, I have to pretend I hate the holes. And then I can get out. And so I wait and smile and wait. Hi, I'm Sephera Giron. I just read for you my story Release. It's a short story that was published in Asylum, the Psycho Ward, and it was also published in Bad Dreams, and you can find it now as an independent book, short story, on Kindle over at Amazon.com or at Smashwords. Thank you very much for listening.